My pleasure to introduce our guests for this evening, April Jefferson and Mark Kilby, who will be speaking to you about unscripted conversation, open space, and agility. April's an independent coach, collaboration facilitator, experience crafter, game creator, speaker, and organizing founder. Among other things, Mark is an author, consultant, a facilitator, and a former rocket scientist. I want to know more about that personally. In the spirit of open space, April and Mark invite all of you to speak up at any time with questions, comments, asides, interjections, musical interludes, or you can post questions or comments in the chat as usual if you prefer. So over to you, April and Mark.
Awesome. Wait, to test it out, because I just need to confirm that the audio's working. Could you go off of mute and give me a woohoo or something like that? So I just know that it's working, so we can have that conversation.
Woo!
Woohoo!
Cuckoo! Cuckoo!
Okay. All right. We have people in the room. Yes. Well, it's unscripted, but the unscripted part doesn't just include Mark and I. It includes you too. So your voices matter in this conversation. Open space, agile, agility. That's what we came here to talk to you about in that connection. For some people may know that, oh my goodness, I love open space. I live and breathe open space just a little bit. You know, I may have done about a dozen open space last year, you know, pandemic.
Okay, all right, hold on. You're underselling this. So April's not happy if she's not organizing at least 2 open spaces per month.
Yeah.
Sometimes more, just to let you know.
So for people who aren't familiar with open space, is that open space is powered by 5 principles and 1 law. And those are whoever's there are the right people, whatever happens is the only thing that could. Wherever it happens is the right place. When it starts, it starts. When it's over, and that law of personal mobility, one where if you're not adding or contributing value, go to some place that you could. But Mark's going to tell you what we're going to do first.
Yeah, so if you feel the urge to walk out, we're okay with that. Open space and agility, we see a very close connection, and we see that open space is more than just events. So you might have gone to an open space event or an unconference, which is a close cousin to open space conferences. But we see the two very closely connected, and open space showing up in many different ways. Sometimes it shows up in surprising ways. And I'm just going to put a question out there that I want you to think about. What kind of constraints can inhibit your Agile journey or one that you support? I put a Jamboard link in there, and it should be open for you. Think about that question. What kind of constraints inhibit your Agile journey or one you support? We don't seem to be lacking for constraints in our Agile journey, and more keep coming. We're already Agile. Yeah, I've never heard that one before. Wow. So it sounds like we have some experienced, maybe battle-hardened Agilists in this group here. Boy, I hate to go. You guys are just generating some great answers. I hate to move it along.
Coming. Karen said battle hardened or battle scarred.
Battle scarred. I was going to go there, but I thought, no.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So think about all those constraints that you just listed. And if you move over to frame 2, how might these constraints become options? I pick anyone.
You said we can jump in and talk, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jumping in and talking. I was actually just looking at Daniel Mezik's Open Space Agility and some of the experience videos from executives that have been through it. And it made me want to cry because we are doing things. I'm sitting in meetings with leaders who are talking about DevOps, automating pipeline, blah, blah, teams too big, too small, Scrum, scale, blah. And I'm like, stop talking and just do it. But stop talking in rooms with leaders and bring everybody together. So I love what you're asking here, because it's our perspective that needs to shift, and that it's like we could take those sticky notes from that previous slide, and those become the sessions at the open space. And each one could be a conversation with everybody who was interested.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
feel free to take one or a few of those.
Yeah.
And how could you flip this into an option?
Can I ask, an option for what? What do you mean by options? How can it become options?
Well, an option to move forward perhaps in that Agile journey.
Okay.
How can you find, another way to put it is, how can you find mobility in that constraint? Think about, I was just reflecting on, like, man, like, we live in a crazy world. Well, a lot of hard things have happened. Think about, I have a dear friend who is an Agilist, and he was a war child. He grew up in a war-torn area. And he said, even in that war-torn area, and he didn't know if his friend that was playing next to him would be alive the next day, he still discovered play in it. They still found joy and mobility and community and different things in it with the constraint that they were in.
April, at the beginning of this, sorry, I'm just getting excited here, because at the beginning of this, you talked about there being a few rules about open space. Can you maybe talk about what some of those are and how you're bringing those to life in this exercise?
Rule. There's only one rule that powers open space. That's the law of mobility.
Oh, I thought
that
you said
is a mental rule. There's principles. There's 5 principles.
Yeah.
And,
can you tell me the difference?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And mobility is within all of those principles. Like, whoever's there are the right people. Like right now, today, you are the right people in this session. Whatever happens is the only thing that could. This is an unscripted conversation. Wherever it happens is the right place. We're meeting on Zoom instead of in person. When it starts, it starts. We played a little music, we chatted a little, we laughed, talked about some theater, and then we started. So if it's over, it's over.
How do you introduce this into an organization that it's used to having very structured meetings that start at a specific time and certain people are invited to the meeting and other people are excluded? How do you introduce something like this into those organizations?
Ooh, great question. Do you want me to answer, Mark, or do you want to? You want to try?
No, go ahead and start.
Okay. One of the ways, the simplest way that I have introduced this is with the law of mobility, which is often referred to as the law of 2 feet, is that giving them choice. People complain about too many meetings. It's just saying, like, okay, what do you need from me? How can I add value here? And making a decision on whether you go or not. Just because someone adds it to your calendar, does that mean you have to go? No. Giving people that mental mobility to start asking questions, start thinking about why and how. That's the simplest way that I've helped people start changing their mindset, that they have choice. How about you, Mark?
So a quick story, and I want to come back to what's on the board here soon too, because I've seen some great responses. Long story short, some of you know I do a little bit with remote teams, and there was one remote organization that they wanted to start an all hands gathering where they bring everyone together, talk about the big challenges the organization was facing. They scheduled it all out, structured it. Then they did a survey afterwards to find out how people liked it, and everyone went, meh. Next year, my boss asked me, he says, we can't do that again. We've got to do something that really helps people engage and really helps people feel they are part of the organization. So we held it as an open space. I was fought tooth and nail, not by the leaders as much as the individuals in the organization that were used to that structure. Can we have an agenda? Can we? No, we don't need it. We just need a theme. After, well, actually, I would say it was a 3-day open space, that first one. We had longer ones after that. It was a 3-day open space. After the first day, a lot of people in that organization came up to me and said, I got it. I am so ready for tomorrow. I am so exhausted after today because I talked more than I ever have. I've heard that same story again. They talked more with more people in the organization in that first day of open space than they had ever done in the year, 2 years, or more years that some of those people have been there. One of the things I want you to notice is how many responses do you see on the second board versus this first board? More or less on the first board?
More.
More. Yeah. We're not always used to shifting our thinking. We're not always used to looking at the constraints as options. But in what April was explaining earlier about the principles and the law is the only real constraint, and it's really more of a suggestion actually in open space, as are the principles. But there are minimal constraints for a group of people to share ideas, debate, whatever they need to share when there's a topic they're passionate about. So we get very passionate about the constraints, but can we flip them around? So I'm going to ask, where do you see some examples on the second board of where we're starting to flip some of these constraints around?
Yeah, I think that recently, so I will share about that, Mark. Thank you. I think recently, the thing about too many meetings, that coach of mine used to say, getting in the weeds. Like, I just told my new bosses, I am tired of arguing about SAFe and Scrum and meetings and who booked the meeting and who sent. I am sick and tired of it. And just flip, okay. I don't want to argue about it anymore with people I work with. And so, it's been really just kind of taking a step back and looking at the values and then saying, like, okay, how am I getting in the way? As I'm a Scrum Master, how am I getting in the way of what you think Agile should be? And then how can I help you get to where you think Agile should be? And it stunned them. It stunned my new manager, who was a project manager, because I'm tired of arguing about Agile. I'm not doing it anymore. So that's my share.
We have to remember that Agile is not the goal. There's something else. It's a lot deeper. And there's so many options. I believe I'll tell you one thing about that huge list we have on the first frame. A game that I played often as a part of me leveraging improv in my coaching and having people kind of like rethink and get into their creative mindset was where I would have them think of 100 ideas, like, hey, if I grab this, oh, you know what? This isn't a marker. This is a boat. Or this is a pointer. And then people this is a bomb. They start thinking of all these different ideas. Is that getting to a place, that open space, when you free your mind from thinking about the constraint, you can start seeing other ways to move and not seeking permission, working within those bounds. That's like, think about games and how you can get competitive. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm still following the rules, but I found another way to do and be within it.
I'm finding this really powerful because I think what you're saying is the shift in perspective, like we mentioned earlier, battle scarred. And so you need, this space that we're creating and you're creating for us is getting us to think about what did we lose along the way in our battle weary journey? And like why I feel like sometimes we're stopping ourselves as an Agile community, like using words and which framework and all the rest, as you said before. And I've been wanting to lead open space at the company for like, I don't know how long. And I've waited to find permission.
Haha. I'd go back to what Mark said about that resistance initially. And my experience when it's got to be 10 years ago, I organized an open space when I was working in the government of Ontario. And I didn't really get permission. I just invited a whole bunch of people, and a lot of people were shocked because they were not used to people kind of skirting the rules like that. And there was sort of uncertainty about it because nobody knew what open space was, and there was no sort of preliminary agenda or anything. But it was a day-long thing, and at the end of it, the feedback that we did a circle at the end where everyone kind of provided their reactions, and several people said words to the effect of, "This is the best corporate learning experience I have ever had in my entire career." And these are senior people in the government. And so if you can get past that hurdle by hook or by crook, like do what you need to do. And people just, they grab onto it, and it becomes a hugely valuable experience for them. And so, you just got to overcome that kind of inertia or uncertainty and get there, and then it's a huge win.
Yeah, and I do want to point one other thing out. I'm going to switch to a logistics tone right now. So Jeff and John have been subtly reminding us of the time box, but I'll say April and I are happy to stay on. If you need to go, that is part of open space. So I just want to put that out there. I am really curious who put Jackie Chan up there, because that's a great example.
That was me.
I don't understand the connection, actually.
To me, this sort of the switch from constraints to options is very much in the spirit of Kung Fu, where you use your opponent's move to gain advantage. And you kind of use that momentum to make something happen that wasn't planned by the powers that be in the corporation, and you kind of just you swing what you need out of that energy that was there but was directed arguably wrong.
Mm-hmm. And if you watch almost any Jackie Chan movie, he uses what's around him to handle the situation. It could be a broom, it could be anything. Things that you would not normally think of to be using in martial arts, but it's always fascinating to see. I know it, and I know it's choreographed, but it's just interesting how he thinks of things, because a lot of it, from what I understand, is created by him. So.
I'm reminded I did something very similar when I was working with a team. I had to use 4x6 Post-it notes instead of the regulation Agile 3x3 Post-it notes.
Oh my goodness! And you're still in the Agile club.
Well, yeah.
He's on probation.
That's right.
Double secret probation, probably.
So
just a reminder, folks, just in case anyone does have to leave, there is a link in the chat to a feedback form. Love to get any feedback for John and Tom and Karen and the other organizers as well. But I'm not. I'll hang out, Mark and April, as long as you're willing to. Keep going.
Well, I wanted to say one thing for people if they have to depart is that you can, Mark and I are actually writing a book about open space and the mindset of open space that could probably help you empower like your journey, personal and professional. And we have other classes that we're offering, like monthly learning opportunities that are priced for people in a pandemic, and that you can join us at. But other than that, one of the biggest things that I want to share is that doing an open space event in organizations is very powerful. But what we're sharing with you also is that mindset of open space, by walking in mobility and leveraging those principles and how you engage, open space can be a part of your daily and lived experience without the event of open space.
Yeah.
But that leads to one of my questions, because there are people who've said, well, why don't you just do a 1 hour open space or a 2 hour open space? And is it, to me, it doesn't provide enough space for it to really work. And what do you guys think?
Well, then I would call that lean coffee.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And that's actually how I introduced that first open space, because there was so much tension around, you're going to bring us all, you're going to fly us into a city without having an agenda. I started doing lean coffees about 2 months out because I knew I was going to get that. And I would just have them. I wouldn't make a big deal about them. I'd just say, hey, if you want to come talk, come talk. They would say, about what? I said, come find out. And so I would introduce lean coffee. I would have them suggest topics. And sometimes they'd say, well, what are we going to talk about? I said, well, what problems are you having in the organization? Or where'd you go on vacation? Any cool pictures? I don't care what you bring up. You can bring up anything you want to. And we started building connections in those 1 hour lean coffees. And being that we're remote, we couldn't easily say do it over lunchtime because everyone had a different lunchtime. But I varied the times for different lean coffees so several people could experience it. What was interesting was who came. I had engineers, I had support people, I had customer success, I had a couple salespeople show up that were all curious, what is this? So it was the curiosity that brought them together.
So what I would offer is that when you think about lean coffee, is it an open space event? No, but it has the principles of open space and it honors the law that powers open space. And that's what you're trying to bring forth.
Mm-hmm.
I find we have a lean coffee with our senior executive in IT. I find it has turned more into a Q&A forum rather than lean coffee, although, being able to vote on whether you want to continue the conversation is that law of 2 feet. But it's an interesting idea, maybe suggesting topics there to open the space bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe that's what's needed for that. Maybe you need to reset. Again, is it a constraint or is it an option? So one of the things, because I know I'm noticing people do need to drop off. One thing I did want to mention is if you've been to an open space event, after the facilitator explains the law and the principles and basically how things operate, they open up the space for topic suggestions. And people pitch their topics briefly and talk about where they're going to talk about it. And sometimes the topics look more like this first board. But sometimes I find the more interesting conversations happen when we start talking about the options around those constraints. So I would say next time you're at a lean coffee or at an open space event, you might want to think about how you even reframe your topics so that you might get some people curious that you weren't expecting, but they'll still be the right people.
Yeah, And that like why you gather, that the theme of why you gather is very important, and for it to be successful if you're having an open space event in an organization. I've done it in organizations, and it was action focused. Almost all of them, by the time I left that organization, over 90% of them were done or still being developed. Like they're still actively working on it. And that is awesome. Where people, and these were a bunch of kind of like how we felt here, like I'm constrained as a coach or whatever role I'm playing in an organization, whatever you're coaching at the team level, portfolio program, where however you're engaged, as a team member, where people felt constrained. And they learned that, oh, you know what? I'm actually empowered to change and to own it. The only thing that was inhibiting them was their mind. They actually had, if they wanted to walk in the agency to make these changes, they could have. No one told them they couldn't. They just had the belief that they could. And they started making things happen. Is that instead of seeking permission, they felt like they had the agency that they could completely walk in their own mobility. And that's beautiful. And I've seen it from organization after organization. The action actually happens, dealing with those elephants that people just whisper about, actually tackling them. And that could be a good open space event, is having something around the elephant in the room. Bring it out into the open.
What do you guys use for virtual open space from a tooling perspective or platform perspective?
Oh.
Got to drop off. Just want to say thank you, Mark. Thank you, April. Love the conversation. Love hearing from you. Great seeing you. And sorry, I've got to drop off. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
See you, Jeff.
Great question, Tom. I have done several open spaces and played with different things, but my favorite tool to use is actually KikoChat. It's definitely really amazing for large scale events. The last one I did had over 500 people.
Right.
Depending on how small it is, I may simply use one Zoom account.
Right.
And navigating it, especially with Zoom, with the ability for people to move to their own breakout rooms.
Have you played around with Kumo Space yet at all?
I was going to say Kumo Space is another one. Spatial Chat would be another one that you could use in a small setting. Another one is called they don't have whiteboarding yet.
Hopin and
Wonder.me is another one. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it kind of spontaneously forms groups. That's another one.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do any of those allow for that feeling that you're in a circle? Because that's what I find is most missing from these, that opening circle ability. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Spatial Chat is a really great, however, you can feel a great circle. It's how you hold the space. Because I've had that comment throughout the entire pandemic. They're like, oh, I won't go to a virtual one, but they haven't experienced it. And I have been to some terrible and some really amazing. It's how you connect people together. You have to really think about, it's not just the fact that it's a circle, but the circle, what it represents. It represents community connection. So how do you connect people together virtually to have that image of a circle in their mind on how they engage with one another?
Yeah. I wanted to add to that, spontaneity is good, but also there's many different ways to represent these elements, as April was hinting at. I've seen April do some amazing things in representing the bulletin board or the marketplace, or just providing different spaces for conversation. And I don't know who put the bubble wrap image on the second board, but I think it's another great. Yeah, Mara, was that you? That was a great example, because okay, it's for protecting a package, but it's also great fun to play with. And cats really don't like bubble wrap. So if you want to keep your cats off of things, put bubble wrap over it. Trust me. So it looks like one thing, but there's many uses. So that ability to step back and reframe what you think something is, and say, oh well, I could use it this way or that way. That's how I've been able to really adapt many very simplistic tools for remote teams before we had any of these tools. I think April does a much better job, but
Yeah.
she has more of a design sense than I do.
Yeah, you can do it in so many different ways. Every tool, like Mark and I, like we do training around remote experiences. So when you're looking at things virtually, and then when you get back to doing things in person too, is that we understand that holding space is not just eco-facilitation. You have to think about many elements to support it. And when you're thinking about tooling, you want to use the right tooling for the right audience. For example, we used a Jamboard here instead of like Miro or Muro or different things, because it's very simple. It's a simple tool. Like just grab a sticky note, different things like that. It makes sense. There's no trying to get a learning curve.
If you set the permissions correctly.
Yeah, if you set the permissions correctly, right? So you have to use the right tool for the right audience and for people like different for what you're doing.
So I think we have a few more folks on. I just want to check for those of you who've kind of been hanging back. Were there any questions or any comments? I just want to make sure you have space to chime in if you'd like.
I have a more general question.
Sure, Mike.
For someone who's not or is relatively new and not crazy familiar with everything, is there a good place to kind of go back to refer to for the concept of open space? Like I think I understand the lean agile, the lean coffee piece, but this one's new for me.
Sure, definitely.
Owen Harrison.
I will. I'm just going to give you a link to the Open Space Institute website. They have tons of links about open space. I'm on the board here, so that's why I first thought about it. But
perfect. Thank you.
Where you can find out a lot about open space technology, which was Harrison and Owen.
And the best thing to do is experience it. Which reminds me, April, when is your next open space?
Well, I have two.
Of course.
This month, June 19th, I'm doing a Juneteenth celebration, which is kind of like the 4th of July for melanated souls here in the U.S. as we celebrate when we were truly free from slavery. So I'm doing one for the Black Agile community. And then I'm also doing another one for women in Agile. Again, all genders are welcome. And I'll put that link in the chat.
I can tell you that I met some of this community for the first time at an open space at Play for Agile in Cornwall. And I also was going by myself, and I had real misgivings about going to a conference. I had no agenda. Mm-hmm. And somebody told me I should go and I'm going to have fun, and I never had more fun in my life.
There you go.
I know. It is when you walk into it and it's quite new, for a lot of people, they feel like oh, where's the structure? And some people, when you let go, you can find so much freedom in the space, and it's quite beautiful. And let me put the link to the other one.
My starting point always is Wikipedia, so I always recommend that as a place to start, just not to end.
Yeah.
And I mean, Owen Harrison has written a book about it as well, and how it developed initially. So I can't remember the name of the book, but summer reading.
Harrison Owen. Owen is the
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to let people know
Thank you.
because it wasn't a comment there.
It's obviously time for me to take a break. I'm going to leave, but thank you so much, guys. This is awesome. Shifted
You're
my thinking.
welcome.
You're very welcome.
Well, love to see you at anything
Yeah.
again at any time, and you can follow Mark and I. Connect with
Okay.
me. I'll eventually get to all my LinkedIn connections and Twitters and things like that. So yeah.
Now, can we convince Evan to switch business agility up for open space?
I wonder who might have been talking to him about that.
Right.
I am on the program team. You can put a little whistle in his ear.
Not a bad idea.
I don't have anything else to do, but to join all these different
Exactly.
events and help organize them. Right.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was great. And I appreciate you taking the time.